When you hear the name John Milton, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's Paradise Lost, right? We get this picture of a very solemn, blind, religious old man quietly writing one of the greatest poems ever. But what if I told you that image is one of the biggest myths in all of literature? Well, today, we're going to tear that myth down and show you the political firebrand, the radical and the revolutionary who was hiding behind the poet all along. So on one side, you have the common image, the quiet, devout artist. And on the other side, the shocking truth, a man who openly, even proudly, championed the execution of a king. Milton was no recluse living in an ivory tower. No way. He was a propagandist, a political brawler, and really an architect of a revolution who used his pen like a weapon. To really get Milton, you have to understand the world he lived in. And 17th century England, it was basically a powder keg waiting to explode. A brutal civil war was tearing the country apart. You had the royalists, who were loyal to King Charles I, fighting against the parliamentarians, led by Oliver Cromwell, who wanted to create a republic. And Milton? He wasn't just some guy cheering from the sidelines. He was one of the loudest, sharpest, and most influential voices for the revolution. I mean, just look at this timeline. He was right in the thick of it. When Parliament did the unthinkable, when they actually executed King Charles in 1649, Milton didn't run and hide. He stepped up and wrote the official justification for it. He then became the Secretary for Foreign Tongues in Cromwell's new republic. That basically made him the government's international spokesperson, defending this bloody revolution to the rest of Europe. Now, this was an incredibly dangerous game to play, because when Cromwell died and the monarchy was restored in 1660, Milton was immediately a marked man. He was arrested for treason, his books were publicly burned, he lost his entire fortune, and he was literally facing the executioner's axe. He only managed to escape with his life because he had some very powerful friends, but his political career, it was completely and utterly over. And nothing, I mean nothing, shows his unbreakable spirit more than this moment. Years later, he's completely blind, he's disgraced, and he gets a visit from the new king's brother, the Duke of York. The Duke taunts him, asking if his blindness is God's punishment for being a traitor. Now, most people would have probably begged for forgiveness, but not Milton. He fires back with this absolutely devastating comeback. He basically says, "If my blindness is a punishment, what about your dad, who lost his entire head?" Even in total darkness, his wit was as sharp as a blade. But his defiance wasn't just out in the political world. Milton was a man of deep and honestly pretty startling contradictions. He was this great champion of liberty, but as we're about to see, his idea of freedom had some pretty clear, and for us, pretty shocking limits. So back in 1644, he wrote this tract called Areopagitica. It's one of the most powerful defenses of free speech ever written. He was absolutely furious that the new revolutionary government he supported was using the exact same censorship tactics as the monarchy they just overthrew. His argument was revolutionary for its time. Let all ideas, good and bad, fight it out in the open. He truly believed that if you let them grapple, truth would always, always win. But here's the massive contradiction. His vision for a free press absolutely did not extend to Catholics. Now, to our modern ears, that sounds like pure hypocrisy, right? But for Milton, this wasn't really about religion. It was about national security. He saw Catholicism as a political allegiance to a foreign power, the Pope in Rome, and he thought that was a direct threat to England's very existence. It's a huge blind spot for him, for sure, but it was one that was rooted in the political fears of his time. And his private life? Oh boy, it was just as chaotic. At 34 years old, Milton, the hardcore Republican, marries a 17-year-old from a diehard royalist family. What could go wrong? Well, it was a total disaster. She left him after just 1 month. So what does he do? He writes a series of incredibly scandalous pamphlets, arguing that people should be able to get divorced just for being incompatible. This was unheard of, and it made him infamous. And the final irony? When his wife's royalist family lost the war, he actually took them all in as refugees. Tragedy just kept following him, though. After his first wife died in childbirth, his beloved second wife died in the exact same way. So let's just recap. By the 1660s, Milton had lost everything. His political cause was dead. He was a public enemy. He'd suffered unbelievable personal loss. And now, he was completely blind. He was literally living in total darkness. And it was from this absolute bottom, this abyss, that he created his masterpiece. He decided he was going to write an epic poem, one to rival the greats, like Homer and Virgil. And the result was Paradise Lost, a colossal work of art with over 10,000 lines of verse. But the most incredible part of this whole story, he composed every single line in his head. That's right. He couldn't see, he couldn't write a single word down himself. He dictated the entire epic poem, verse by verse, line by line, to his daughters or to anyone who would listen and write for him. It is just one of the most incredible feats of memory and pure creative power in all of human history. But the poem he created wasn't some simple, pious tale. Oh no, it was complex, it was ambiguous, and it was deeply controversial. It kicked off a debate that is still raging today. And it's all centered on the poem's most charismatic and unforgettable character, Satan. See, Milton's Satan isn't some cartoon monster with a pitchfork. He is charming, he's persuasive, he's defiant. He's the one who famously says it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. It kind of makes sense that a guy who justified killing a king would create the greatest rebel in all of literature. The Romantic poets like William Blake were convinced Satan was the real hero, a freedom fighter against a tyrant. Blake even said Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. But other thinkers, like C.S. Lewis, say that's the whole point, that Milton was so good at showing how seductive evil can be that we, the readers, fall for Satan's PR campaign, just like Eve did. And the human story is just as deep. Eve doesn't fall just because she's tricked. She falls partly because Satan plays on her vanity. But Adam's fall? That's even more heartbreaking. He isn't tricked at all. He knows eating the fruit is a death sentence. But he does it anyway, because he can't imagine living without Eve. This wasn't just a story about sin, it was a psychological masterpiece about choice, free will, and the incredible cost of love. The poem is also filled with these wonderfully weird details. I mean, Milton, the great religious poet, actually included descriptions of angels eating, digesting, and, well, everything that comes after. He even hid secret messages in the text, acrostics, where the first letters of the line spell out Satan. And he was a language genius, inventing words we use all the time, like pandemonium, which literally means all demons, for the capital of hell. And he was the very first person to use the word space to mean outer space. So where did this massive, universe-spanning vision come from? Well, part of it probably came from a real-life meeting with another giant of history. As a young man, Milton went to Italy and actually met the great astronomer Galileo, who was under house arrest for saying the Earth revolved around the sun. It's thought that this encounter, maybe even a look through Galileo's telescope, completely fired up Milton's imagination and gave him the cosmic scale for his epic. But all of this, his life, his work, it all leads to one final fascinating what-if question. What if history had just gone a little bit differently? You see, before the war, before the revolution and all the tragedy, Milton's big plan for his life's work wasn't Paradise Lost. His grand ambition was to write a great English epic about King Arthur. The political chaos of his time completely shattered that plan and sent his life and his art down a completely different path. So I'll just leave you with this thought to chew on. If the violence, the failure, and the blindness had never happened, would we even have Paradise Lost? Or would the great English epic be a story about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table? It's an incredible paradox, isn't it? The very tragedies that destroyed John Milton's world are exactly what allowed him to build one of the most powerful and enduring works of art in history. Without his loss, would we have ever gained his masterpiece?